Bailey's Story, A Puppy Tale, Chapter 8. One warm day, Ethan and Mom and Dad loaded up the car with a lot of suitcases and boxes, and then they called to me. I hopped into the back seat with Ethan. We took a long ride, and when we were done, we were at the farm. The farm meant new animals, new people, and new smells. From the first moment I jumped out of the car after Ethan, I was very busy. Two older people came out of a big white house, and there was a lot of happy exclaiming while I ran around everybody's feet. Ethan called the two new people Grandma and Grandpa. After he'd spent some time hugging them and hearing things like, "You've grown so much," and "So, is this Bailey?" he ran off across a patch of packed down dirt. "Come on, Bailey," he called to me. He didn't need to call. I was already racing after him. He took me past a split rail fence where an enormous horse stared at me. I crawled under the fence to bark and invite her to play, but she only puffed air out through her nostrils and went back to biting off mouthfuls of grass. Her loss. I dove back under the fence and took off after Ethan, who was happily shouting my name. I followed him around to a pond. I guess that was what the farm had instead of a creek. There was a family of ducks to bark at, and they splashed into the water, paddling away as I ran up. Unfair! The minute I stopped barking, they came back toward the bank, the mother in the lead and a half a dozen little fluff balls behind her in a line. So, of course, I had to bark again. Back they all went into the water. Ducks looked to me to be about as useless as Smokey the cat. "You crazy dog, Bailey!" Happiness was pouring out of Ethan's voice. "Come on!" We went running back to the big white house. Dad left after a few days, but Mom stayed with us on the farm that whole summer. Ethan slept on the porch, and I slept right there with him, and no one even pretended that the arrangement should be different. Grandma liked to sit in a chair and scratch my ears. Grandpa liked to sit in a chair and scratch my ears. Grandma always seemed to be cooking in the kitchen, and she needed me to sample what she made. I was glad to do my part. The love from both of them made me squirm with joy. Outside there was no yard, only a big open field with a fence. The horse, whose name was Flare, stayed inside the fence all day, eating grass. It was a strange thing, though. I never saw her throw up once. She did leave big brown piles all over the field, which smelled interesting, but tasted dry and bland. I only ate a couple of them. Sometimes Flare went into a big, shabby old building called the barn, and the first time I followed her in there, I discovered that the farm had a cat. What a disappointment! She crouched back in the shadows and climbed up high or ran away whenever I came near. Well, that made her a better cat than Smokey, at least. Beyond the barn were woods that were fun to explore, and it was always worth checking out the pond to see if the ducks needed to be barked at. The boy liked the pond, too. He would put me in an old rowboat and push it out into the water. Then he would pull out a pole with a string attached, stick a worm on the string, and drop the worm over the side. Sometimes he'd pull out a small wriggling fish for me to bark at. Then he'd let it go. "It's too little, Bailey," he'd say, "but one of these days I'm going to catch a big one." One afternoon, after we'd been at the farm a few weeks, Ethan was at a table, and Mom was stretched out on a couch with a book, and Grandma had gone upstairs to lie on her bed, which meant that the kitchen didn't smell as good as usual. I decided to explore a little more of the woods. I hadn't gotten very far when I caught sight of a black cat from the barn, waddling slowly away from me. Of course, I took off after her. It was funny when I'd seen the cat in the barn. I didn't remember a white stripe down her back. Now she definitely had one. She didn't run away from me as quickly as she had before either, so I got closer. I realized that this was no cat after all. This was a new kind of animal. Excited, I barked and bowed down low on my front legs to invite her to play. She turned and gave me a solemn look, her fluffy high tail up in the air. I let my own tail wave back and forth. Great. Although Everything about the farm was wonderful. The one thing that was lacking was another dog to wrestle with or chase around. I did miss Marshmallow from time to time. I jumped forward to give my new playmate a nudge with my nose. The next thing I knew, a plume of horrible stink puffed into my face, sticking to my eyes and lips, choking my nose. I sprang back. What had just happened? Half blind, helpless, I retreated, stumbling over sticks and roots, making my way back to the house. Skunk! Grandpa announced when I scratched at the back door to be let in. Oh, you're not coming in, Bailey. Mom came to stand behind Grandpa on the other side of the door. Bailey, did you get into a skunk? Oh, you sure did. Was that the name of the stinky cat creature in the woods? Skunk? Well, was everyone just staring at me, not letting me? Why was everyone just staring at me, not letting me in? I wanted to roll on the carpets and rub some of this awful stuff off my fur. That didn't happen, though. Instead, the boy came out, wrinkling his nose. He took me around to the side of the yard, where he wet me down with a hose. When I tried to lick his face, he pushed me away. Yuck, Bailey, skunk, he said. His voice was so stern that I understood. The skunk had been bad. Then he held my collar while Grandpa showed up with a basket of tomatoes from the garden. Together, Grandpa and the boy squished the soft, warm tomatoes all over me, rubbing the tart-smelling juice into my fur. What a thing to do! I shook myself, sending water and juice and tomato pulp flying. Bailey, the boy yelped, and Grandpa laughed and groaned at the same time. He needs a bath now, the old man said. A bath? What was that? I couldn't remember. Was it something to eat? That would help to make up for all this ridiculous treatment. But it turned out that a bath wasn't something to eat. Mom brought out some soap that smelled a little bit, not very much, I thought, like roses. Ethan rubbed the suds into my fur until I smelled like a cross between Mom, a flower garden, and a tomato. I had never been so embarrassed in my life, and things didn't get much better after that. Even once I was dry, I had to stay out on the porch, and when Ethan came out there to sleep, he kicked me out of his bed. You stink, Bailey, he said. I lay on the floor and tried a whimper or two, but Ethan didn't give in and let me climb up. So I just tried to sleep despite all of the strange, bewildering smells floating around. When morning finally came, I gulped down breakfast. Ethan brought my food bowl out to the porch for me and raced outside. A good roll in the grass helped to rub some of those dreadful odors off my fur. And when I checked out the pond, I got lucky. Something was lying on the bank. A dead fish. It was small, but the smell was good and strong. I rolled in it over and over, twisting my back to get the scent ground in properly. It didn't help as much as I thought it would, though. Under the marvelous dead fish smell, I could still sense tomato and perfume and that horrible tang of skunk. I needed to figure all of this out, so I headed back for the woods. Sure enough, my nose led me quickly to that skunk. I sniffed at her, hoping that I'd pick up some information that would explain what had been going on. And the very same thing happened. She lifted up her tail, and from her rear end, of all places, another powerful blast of stink hit me right in the face. I yelped and backed away as quickly as I could. What was going on? Couldn't that skunk tell I just wanted to play? And if she didn't feel like playing, why didn't she just run away or hide or jump up on something tall like Smokey or the barn cat always did? Shaking my head, blinking, I stumbled back out of the woods. Oh, Bailey, Ethan moaned when I found him by the fence. You're kidding me. I was put through the whole thing again. The water from the hose, tomatoes from the garden, and Mom's horrible fake flowery soap. Was this going to be my life now? Every day? Would I ever be back into the house where Grandma's cooking smelled so delicious? Would I ever sleep in the bed next to my boy again? You are so stupid, Bailey, the boy scolded as he scrubbed me. Grandma was watching this time. Don't call him stupid. It's such an ugly word, she said, and he's hardly more than a puppy. He didn't know what he was doing. Tell him. Tell him he's a doodle. That's what my mother always called me when I was a little girl and I did something wrong. The boy faced me sternly. Bailey, you are a doodle. You are a doodle doodle dog. And then he laughed and Grandma laughed. But I was so miserable I could barely move my tail. Just to show that skunk I was going to ignore her. That would serve her right after everything she'd put me through.